Let's talk about selection in the sequence editor in Blender because the default tools are already pretty powerful and the add-on Power Sequencer adds a little bit to that. If you right-click on one of the strips, it will select it. And if you use Shift and right-click, you will automatically add to your selection for one. But if the strips are of the same size, I'm going to snap them here and Alt-K there, so they are the same size. So I deselect all the strips and press Ctrl Shift right click. It will select linked strips together, so you can keep the video and the audio in sync when you do your edits. That's the very basic. If you want to deselect, you want to press A. A toggles select all strips, so you can press A to select everything in the current context and press A again to deselect everything. So it's very common when you want to select certain strips, for example, to copy and paste something, you will box select, copy, paste, for example, and then press A to deselect. So this is very similar to selection in other areas of Blender. Box select, deselect. The only difference is in the VSE, it's rare that you need to add multiple box selections together because there are other selection tools we're going to see now. So we've replaced the default behavior to make it so it will always replace your selection by default, which will save you a lot of time. It's very common that you want to move some strip around on the editing board and you don't want gaps to happen in your edits. So first, if you right-click and drag on a strip, it will fire the grab operator so you can move it around instantly. When you release, it will place the strip where you want it to be. But Blender preserves the strips as blocks, so if there's not enough space for the strip to sit there, when you release, it will jump to the next gap, to the next space where it can land on the editing board. Now, to solve the issue when you want to move that strip here and you want to resize the neighboring strips at the same time, you can Shift-Alt right-click on the strip to toggle select the neighboring strips and toggle select the handles on the current strip. So if you want to preserve your in and out points on the active strip, you can do it like that with the handles deselected. And when you press G, it's going to slide the strip around, but it's only going to trim the left strip and extend the right one accordingly. And if you Shift-Alt right-click on it and you grab the strip, now it will move that edit just like if you were using the S key, the slide tool. The next trick that's very useful is selecting linked strips, strips that are connected in time. To do that, you hover any strip and press L to select linked under the mouse cursor. It will only select them in one channel, and if there's any gap around the strips, the selection will end at the gap, okay? Similarly, you can press Ctrl plus to grow the selection. You can do Ctrl minus to shrink the selection, but as you select an entire block of strips, then you can't shrink it anymore because for Blender, it's not clear in which direction it should shrink at that point. Another thing you can do if you are not hovering the strip, you can press Ctrl L to select the linked, but it's based on all the strips that you selected. So if you select strips in different channels, you can press Ctrl L to expand the selection to the next cut or the end of the block on every channel independently. This works especially well if you are working on link times. So if you are working with real footage and you have to sync the audio and the video, you select, for example, two strips that are linked in time with Ctrl, Shift, and right click. And then you press Ctrl L to select an entire block and move it around. Let's talk about framing selections now. In Blender, by default, you can use Shift-Alt right arrow to select everything that's to the right of the time cursor. And similarly, if I place the cursor later in time, I can do Shift-Alt left arrow to select everything to the left of the time cursor. You can use that to quickly frame a selection, so split the current context in half, and for example, group strips together in a meta strip with Ctrl G. By default, this is good already, but this is a little limiting. That's why in the add-on, we added some new tool to deselect to the left or right of the time cursor. Let me add a few more cuts in the video to make this a little clearer. I'm going to select from this strip up to this one. I could do B and frame select like that. Sometimes it's a little cumbersome to do. Depending on the size of your editor and how many strips you have, you may have to draw a big selection if you are zoomed in, for example. Instead, you can go select everything to the right of the time cursor. Currently, it's not included in the add-on, but in my Blender, I have Shift E to select everything to the right of the time cursor and Shift Q to select everything to the left. And the reason for that is because it all sits under my left hand. I don't have to use two hands on the keyboard to do that. That's why I chose these shortcuts. So I'll press Shift E to select everything to the right of the time cursor. Then in the add-on, you will find Alt E to deselect to the right of the time cursor, and similarly Alt Q to deselect to the left of the time cursor. This helps you frame very precise selections in no time. There's one last tool that landed in the add-on recently that will be in 1.2. It's the ability to select all related strips. One issue with Blender is if you try to copy something and paste it around, and you only select one strip here, press Ctrl C, and you will get that error telling you that you need to select all related strips. And this is an issue as part of the VSE by default. So you solve that by typically manually selecting all the strips that go together that have linked effects like these. But with the add-on, you can press spacebar and search for select related strips. It will automatically find all the related strips in the board, and note that it also works if you have complex things like these, like crossfades. If I type select related strips, it will find everything that is related to my current strip. And after you've done that, you can press Ctrl C to copy. You will not get any error. I can paste my selection anywhere. And it works, even though it inverted the effect and the video. There you go. Now we use that in the add-on to simplify your life. If, for example, you were to select a single strip and call some tools, you would need to actually select everything manually for the tool to work. And we solve that for you by calling select related strips inside the add-ons code. But that's it for the quick overview of the main selection tools in Blender. Be sure to like the video, to subscribe, and to check out the add-on. It's free, open source. That said, be creative, have fun. See you in the next tutorial. Bye bye.